And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I am very excited to be joined today by Boris Bilovitsky. He is the CEO of Concordium, and we are going to talk about PayFi, stablecoins, privacy, and a whole bunch alongside. Boris, how are you doing today, my friend? Are you well?
I'm doing well, buddy. Thank you very much for having me on. Good to see you.
Very happy to have you here, coming to us live from London.
Yeah,
I agree. I believe. All
you
well
are
there?
absolutely right. Yeah, so far I think it's still standing. It's not burning to the ground yet. I think we're still good. So so far so good.
Excellent. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. For those listening in, this is a LinkedIn Live. So remember, if you have your questions for Boris or myself, if you want to talk about any of the topics or ask us questions on any of the topics that you hear covered today, please do put them into the chat and we'll do our best to get through them as we go through the live. We'll try and answer them in flow or at the end, whichever works best for us. And also, give us your GMs. Let us know what you're working on. Give a shout out to your project. Give a shout out to your community. It's always exciting to learn where people are coming in from and what it is that you are doing in the wide world of Web3. So, Boris, without further ado, for those people who don't know you, could you give us your brief introduction and tell us what it is that you're working on?
Sure. So hi everybody. I'm Boris Bilovitsky. You believe it or not, we just had a wonderful chat about how to pronounce my name. It's a car crash, to put it mildly, so totally fine to call me Triple B or whatever else. And I've heard all sorts of variations. I am originally from Liechtenstein, a little principality in the heart of Europe. Actually made a name for itself on the crypto side several years ago, and is actually still going strong from the regulatory side of things. I really came more from the traditional finance world, you know, in and around private banking, trust world. Like, what else do you want to do when you're from Liechtenstein? Went to Vienna for several years. Was more on the brokerage side, and then through a couple of hoops, ended up in London, actually with an idea to open a restaurant, which didn't work out at all, which I'm quite happy about. And then met my business partner Dimitri, and we started Copper together in January 18, and Copper became quite a thing, which was a wonderful journey, and you learned quite a lot with regards to like infrastructure and more on the institutional side, not so much on the retail side, of course. And subsequently, you know how it is with certain businesses, you kind of come to the point where it kind of outgrows you, and specifically like on the regulated side, there are people that really enjoy this whole committee of the committee and all that kind of stuff. We hired a ton of them over the years and handed that over to new management, and left at, well, what was it, mid last year, and was looking to find something else, and found Concordium, which,
And
yeah,
here we are.
we think we're going to talk about in some more detail.
We probably will. And I like the idea of the restaurant. I wouldn't close on that one just yet. If it's still something you're passionate about. Did you have a concept for the restaurant? What was it going to be?
Yeah. It was like more Austrian Bavarian cuisine, but made very cool. You know, people think just sausages and schnitzels, but it's actually loads of salads, loads of soups. That's a whole different. We'll do another podcast around.
That's a very different podcast. The
like
Good Food podcast with Triple B.
Yeah, it's one of those cuisines that is missing here. You've got Southeast Vietnamese, Southwest Vietnamese. Why the hell wouldn't you have Austrian Bavarian cuisine? But anyway,
there we go. Boiled, baked, and braised with Boris Bilovitsky. Podcast, food podcast coming soon, and Instagram channel to follow. And while we're on the topic, while we're off topic, being a Liechtensteiner, do you feel that Web3 is somehow in the blood? Is it that finance and technology is in the blood? Is it alternative finance is in the blood? Or do you feel some sort of affiliation to Web3 just because your country of origin actually has been very successful? Do you feel like that's been imbued somehow in your journey along the way? Or is it just random how you found your way here?
I don't think it's random. The good thing is if you come from the finance world and you understand a thing or two of how things work behind the scenes, and you have half a brain, you would actually very quickly understand that it's extremely inefficient and makes no sense that it's still running the way that it is today. So if you then look at blockchain, and I never really liked the idea of like this Web 2, Web 3, NAM tagging. I also don't like TradFi. It's those words that are so sucked out by now. But long story short, there must be a better way in the time and age where we're at today. But at the same time, and I think we're going to get into this, I'm quite disappointed that we actually haven't made the advances that I think we should have done up until now. There are several reasons for this. I'm not saying that the ecosystem that we have built over the course of specifically the last like 8 years, like after 2017, really, that's when it started to take off, is in any way, you could call a success. I just don't call it a success. I think that a load of the space that is currently out there is, and sorry for the language, is bullshit. And we need to do a little bit better by talking about topics or actually building things that are not necessarily the purest form of degenerity, right? If this is even a word, I think made it up. So really, what I see when, or coming back to your question, I do believe that my background and everything that I did see over the, whatever it is now, my professional career, around 20 years, kind of helps to kind of shape that a little bit and know where to put the pencil down to go like, okay, this is the direction that we need to go. And kind of reduce the noise in and around, all this stuff that I was briefed not to say too much about anymore in and around, meme coins, etc., which I just find ludicrous. So that's I think, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
It does. It's always interesting to hear people's Web3 origin stories and how and what influence it was. Like 50% of the time, you usually end up with some sort of variant which starts with, I was in kind of insert venue here and insert relation or friend pointed you towards the Bitcoin white paper. And at that point, your life was transformed forever. Insert references of rabbit holes and Alice in Wonderland, etc. And then the other 50% is something that you just never expected, and is a lot more to do with serendipity rather than mission or some sort of grand turning point or fork in the road. And in your case, entrepreneur, take your financial knowledge, set up a huge business like Copper, one of the biggest institutions in the business, which is fascinating. And there would probably not be as much Web3 if there wasn't for Copper. And yet now you're at a protocol. So
yeah,
tell me, how did you find your way? What was it about Concordium that inspired you to take on the CEO role? And what is it that Concordium does that other people should know about?
I mean, there is a whole story to it of how I got to know the founder, which is Lars. They actually became a client of Copper at the time. That's how the project kind of popped up first on my radar. I think the core thing that kind of elevates Concordium, even though it's not well known at all yet, which is hopefully changing, I'm pretty sure changing over the course of the next month or two, was based around the fact of the identity baked into the base protocol. That's for me was, if you are on the receiving end of any sort of regulatory pressure for a prolonged period of time, you kind of, the picture of like how this world on DLT, like based on DLT technology would look like, kind of becomes clearer by the day. And you kind of know is like, oh, there is like a free floating problem. This is the connect. And identity was very much on the forefront of that for me, because like, if I can't just rock up to a bank today, I can't just walk into Barclays, say like, give me an account and I would like to have access to all your services. And they go like, who are you? It's like, none of your business. That's just not how it works, right? So as much as we would like to, and I think we also had a little pre-chat here, as much as I would like to kind of change the entire system, there are certain rules and certain steps that you need to take in order to get to an end state, which is not based around, I sat on a load of panels where people were like, and that's years ago, well, in 2 years, you're going to sit in your underwear on a random Sunday in front of your laptop and draw a new mortgage from some DeFi pool. It's like, no, mate, that's just not going to happen that quickly. So identity, I think when you think of Concordium, there are a couple of things, but I think the core USP is centered around, if I would like to explain it to people, is centered around identity. And then, you take it a step further in and around the zero knowledge proofs that we built into the protocol as well, which in my opinion are the only true way of using zero knowledge proofs when you think about identity as well. So the privacy preserving side of things is very important, depending on what transaction or what kind of use case you want to go after. And suddenly, the world opens up. You kind of mentioned the Bitcoin white paper, right? The very first sentence in there is, global electronic peer-to-peer cash. That is the idea. I still truly believe that the core use case for blockchain, or think of crypto, those two things are very, very different things, but is payments, all the way from buying you coffee at Pret or Starbucks in the morning to very complex transactions in the financial world, plus many other things, right, that you can do using the blockchain. But I think this is the real core of why this had such a surge, and why we kind of see this wonderful little like 3.4 trillion bubble that we currently have built over the years. But there is a much bigger pie over here that nobody has unlocked yet. And there are various reasons for this, but I think core to this is the identity piece. And then there are several other things that I think we're going to talk about throughout the course of this podcast. But if you think of Concordium, think of an identity privacy preserving chain.
Got it. A nice short summary at the end there, and we'll dig further. And thank you for shattering the illusion of this podcast being unscripted and free flowing.
I'm not saying that. We just chatted about the wonderfulness of democracy.
That's it. There is a small amount of conversation that goes on before the green light comes on. But yeah, and I think Bitcoin's a nice example here, because I think the peer-to-peer electronic cash kind of intent as Bitcoin started out, the use case is certainly still there. I think the challenge is somewhere along the way, Bitcoin became a store of value instead.
Scalability.
Digital gold. And so actually the scarcity, security, and scalability of Bitcoin became very attractive, but in the same way as a pension is attractive. And so the people don't tend to buy coffees with their pensions. They tend to hoard their pensions, then use them when they really need them, which is sort of the behavior that we've seen with Bitcoin. And so, yes, people in certain occasions have paid for pizza with Bitcoin, and some people, have been transacting or paying for their rent, etc., or buying houses with Bitcoin. But if you're seeing 100% growth over the course of a year, that's not a particularly effective means of transfer of value, because the opportunity cost of giving that value away is massive. So we need something else, and we will get onto that. Also, shout out to anybody working with zero knowledge proofs. For somebody who spent a couple of years working with Midnight, I strongly believe that privacy, or programmable privacy, is the final frontier for widespread adoption of Web3. Right? People understand decentralization is a good thing. They understand digital identity and self-sovereignty is a good thing. They understand smart contracts are good. They understand that decentralized infrastructure is low cost to run and low cost to deploy on. The case for all of these things are great. And then you get to the point where you go and have a conversation with a CEO, CTO, CISO, whoever it is, and they say, so let me get this straight. You want to put our wallet address, our transaction details, our counterparties, our transaction value, and timestamps and other metadata on a public record for everybody to see all the time. And you say, yes, that's how blockchains work. And they say, no, we do not want that. If you were then to say, well, what if we were enabled to selectively shield and disclose that information, and you kept all of the other stuff that you like? And they'd be like, oh, well, that sounds like a good idea. This is where we are. This is the turning point that I think we're at with Web3. And there are a small number of projects bringing that. Except
I disagree one thing, what you just said.
Go for it.
Smart contracts in its purest form are absolutely awesome. Mm-hmm. But that is there, like the name would suggest, in my and our humble opinion at Concordium, is there in order to enforce conditionality, which is programmable. What it should not do under any circumstance is act as a custodial function. So this is the part that we didn't come to yet, but this is the main difference on Concordium, right? Because there are two ways that you can handle payments nowadays, right? Whatever it is, complex financial transactions all the way to anything else that I just mentioned, right? There are either two ways. Either you need to trust me that I'm sending you $100 every single minute, every single month, whatever else it is. So I rock up and I push the button, or we agree to put it into the smart contract, and have the value sitting there. Let's assume 100 times 12 over the course of a year, so $1,200, and it releases it according to the calendar, which in my opinion is very, very wrong. So this is where all the problems come from. You just need to look at the recent hacks. It's all smart contract related. Why? Because the industry has kind of built, like, everything that happened in like 2020, 2021, in and around DeFi and, you know, the NFTs and all this kind of jazz that was happening, awesome innovation, has kind of, the space and specifically like the big chains haven't evolved away from that. It's kind of still in that realm, which if you really want to go down the route of smart programmable money, you need to be able to do this on the base layer. You cannot do this in a smart contract when it comes to issuance. So this is where Concordium is very unique, because we allow this to happen on the base layer by so-called PLTs, so protocol level tokens. So you issue natively alongside, you know, CCD, our native currency, hence program things in. When you then sprinkle identity on top, that is also built in there, you really have smart money where you then go into age verification, geofencing, whatever else it is, plus the zero knowledge proofs that keep it all private, should you want to. So suddenly you have a chain that actually makes a lot of sense, which is why I'm saying, like, right now, not very much known, very soon, very different.
Got you, especially after this podcast drops. But you've given us a really helpful overview there of the ingredients, right? What are the raw features that we need to have peer-to-peer digital electronic cash, or to have unstoppable applications with privacy in a decentralized manner, or to have borderless, always-on, automated banking or financial systems. Insert the wanky consulting words as you choose to describe the thing that you want. But why don't we go a level deeper? Why don't we go into actual specificity? So talk to us about stablecoins.
Yeah. Having, like, kind of tie it back to what I said earlier, I do believe that stablecoins are, you know, the natural next step for the evolution of mass adoption, quite frankly. And there are various types, right? From the non-yield bearing ones, the ones that we know that kind of rule the world right now, but like in many ways rule the world in a way that is very much pegged to anything crypto only. You know, either you use it as collateral for your derivatives positions on various exchanges, or to trade spot, or chuck it into a DeFi yield pool for some yield farming. Like, that's literally what the use case is right now. It's not being used in order to rock up to Starbucks and pay for your coffee yet. So this is where we would like to get to. So there are different types, because the reason why I want to mention this, because I truly believe that the time value of money, depending on the transaction that you're trying to do, has a major impact with regards to yield and how much cheese can go around the table, depending on what I'm doing. Specifically, if I start to disintermediate old school ways of, you know, the traditional financial world. So Concordium has hence, because that is the direction that we have decided to take at the beginning of the year, really solid, for, like, we are a chain for stablecoins. And out of that, of course, comes certain, you know, the idea of having a stablecoin on a chain only makes sense if there is a use case that you would like to unlock. Do you really want to compete with Tether or Circle on your you know, Bitcoin collateralization, like derivatives position? It's going to be a pretty hard task to do, because it's so enshrined right now, at least in the world that we have here. Concordium is not focused on that world, even though we're kind of being pushed into this right now due to the identity piece, because it solves for things like travel rule and other stuff, but this is a completely separate conversation. We very much believe that, like I said, the next growth spurt that we're going to see in, even if you want to call it just like this, crypto for the time being, is going to be based on the idea of stablecoins actual having usability in various use cases. And when it comes to this, identity needs to play a role, which is why we are, just today, we announced another partner that is building on the chain, which we're very thrilled about. I think it's now 7 or 8 that are actively building. We're releasing those PLTs at the end of June, beginning of July. I think we're still on track with regards to end of June. But in a nutshell, the idea is that stablecoins are the use case in order to kind of drive the adoption further away from that pie very much focusing on the rest of the world, which is a huge one. I mean, I don't know, JP Morgan, I think, is doing 10 trillion a day in transaction volume when it comes to payments. There's a lot of things to do here, and everybody is trying to figure that out. And what you see in America, also from the regulatory side of things, in and around the Genius Act, they understand that this is the direction that it should be taking. And from there, I think we have the stepping stone in order to branch out to do completely other things. So we're very 100%. Much use case focused.
Get stablecoin legislation right first. Then very quickly you have a base for crypto that is anchored close to something that the financial services industry understands, and then you can start with more wild and exotic variations. But if you at least enable the entrance of stablecoins or digital assets that look like, behave like, or are backed by fiat, then you allow for innovation much more quickly, which is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the fiat part has, of course, there are a load of different factors why I do see that picture getting sharper. Because when you think of geopolitics, the dollar is being under pressure a little bit. Then you've got the BRICS nations trying to brew something up. You've got the Middle East doing their thing right now because they just have all the money. So at the end of the day, there is an interest for this to work out. And if you peg it, for a better word, to a fiat currency to start off with, that makes a lot of sense. But from there on, we can actually use that wonderful new fabric that we have created over the course of the last the last decade to actually start weaving completely new products and services, which is the exciting bit. But for the time being, you should be focused in and around, why those regulations are so important. If it's like MiCA related compliance in and around the stable coins there, which some don't give a shit about, some very much do. And you need to have a technological solution or a base layer that allows you to program that in a smart way that solves for also those compliance related problems. As much fun as compliance is, right? It's not the most sexy topic on the planet. But without it, it just doesn't work. That's just not the world we live in. So, which is where the identity comes in. And we can talk about a couple of use cases in a second, but otherwise, we'll just blubber on for ages. So I'm going to let you ask questions and stuff.
No, this is a good gradual dive into, again, what is quite a technical, or in some cases sophisticated topic. People may say, "Oh, well, it's just a matter of digitizing a euro or digitizing a dollar." Yes, sort of. But the regulation, the complexity, and the integrations required to manage exchange of money, 2 Bitcoin wallets, one to another, is very simple, broadly. But being able to integrate digital assets with a fiat value. Stablecoins is a bit of a misnomer. I often find myself saying stablecoins, then immediately saying, "Oh, I don't like that." Because the reason we started calling them stablecoins is because all the other coins were volatile. What we actually talk about is a digital euro or a digital dollar or a digital asset variation of a dollar or digital asset variation on a
the variations. Ledger. Yeah, I think the variations are important because you can just beg it by have it sitting in the bank account and buy some, treasuries, either distribute the yield or not. But there are awesome projects out there where you can kind of still stay very crypto native, like Athena, for example, and just, rake in funding rates and stuff like this. So there are wonderful ways where you can kind of see the direction that this can go, not just tokenizing in the form of the dollar itself, actually tokenizing credit funds. Suddenly the tokenization of funds that are spitting out a yield actually start to make sense. Specifically, if you have the ability to use them as a mean of transfer, as a mean of payment for whatever you would like to achieve, right? So it's just a natural stepping stone. I think we, as a human race in general, make the mistake far too often that we're trying to run before we can crawl. It's like there is a natural order. You need to start to learn to walk, and so on and so on. So it's like the space is what I've learned, and I think you as well, over the course of the years now, is the speed at which things are getting done is absolutely mind-boggling. Like to kind of stay on the horse and just keep going without being, knocked off is kind of that's a skill in itself. But then again, you kind of run into that wall of this big traditional, the day-to-day world that is just not ready with regards to this. And I think the stable coins are, in terms of its importance, is a natural way of kind of sorting that out, of people going like, okay, so I can use this for that. Like, I'm thinking of my parents. Like, I don't have any grandparents anymore, but I'm thinking of my parents. If I would try to explain to them of like, well, wallets and keys and mnemonic phrases and stuff like that, we need to find a way of abstracting this away. If we have already like Face ID and stuff like this, use it in that way. So it should. The way that I always say is like, people make the mistake of trying to understand blockchain instead of just using it. Everybody's trying to understand it. Don't understand it, because guess what? If I ask you a question of like what is happening when you rock up to or you buy something online, the shit show that happens behind the scenes in order to settle that transaction is mind-blowing. So yeah.
If you want to go fast, launch a meme coin. If you want to go far, launch a regulated stablecoin. Is that what you're trying to say?
Kind of. I would also like to say, never launch a meme coin.
Also, never launch a meme coin.
Yeah, that's.
I want to believe that I take this view. I've worked in and around technology and innovation for almost my entire career, and I like to go out with the view that you should never shit on anybody's idea, because it may just be the first iteration of whatever comes next. And
that's exactly what it is.
While I think it was either Yatsu or Robbie Young, one of the twins, who said that the great thing about meme coins is you've established the idea of, the use case of ideas attracting liquidity. And if that idea is literally just pump the price, post some tweets, and see who's the last person to sell, that's not a particularly great idea. But you have at least identified the way of capitalizing community. And that will be useful for a whole bunch of other things at some point in life. In and around the VeChain community, we have lots of what we call X to earn, where certain community activities. By the way. Thank you very much. This isn't about me, but either way, to illustrate by example and to get a shameless plug, we are trying to demonstrate how community action can be rewarded with cryptocurrency, or can be rewarded with tokens that exist on a blockchain, and then as a result, all the back office functionality around voting, around distribution, around staking, etc., around those rewards becoming larger. You obfuscate away in the application, but it's a good platform on which to do it. Meme coins are kind of the version 1, where NFTs were version 1 of RWAs, or non-fungible tokens were version 1 of tokenization of real-world assets. At that point, we didn't have any real-world assets to tokenize, so we were just using JPEGs. Or rather, we were just using the pointing the ownership of a digital asset to somebody's wallet. We will eventually see that concept of attracting capital or liquidity towards ideas or communities become something else. But I agree, the societal value of meme coins today is probably questionable in the large majority of cases.
What I'm saying is, we prove that there is a network wallet, a network value, and the community value. It's proven. So let's kind of move on. Like, let's actually solve for problems. Like, let's not make every single word in the English dictionary a coin. Like that.
There you go.
That's my view. Anyways, let's not stay on that topic, because that's it.
On to privacy and maybe compliance, and certainly ZK. So followers of the show will have listened to me talk about ZK periodically over the last few years. From personal interest perspective, from my work at Midnight. Give me the Concordium house view on privacy, zero knowledge. What is it that you guys think is needed in the world, and how are you going about delivering it?
Again, you kind of need to tie it back to the use case, right? There is only so many times that I feel comfortable, depending on what I would like to access, to show my passport or my driving license. So it really comes down to the way that Concordium does it. And then, people go like, okay, it's an identity chain. Let me explain this, because people don't quite understand in detail of what this entails. What happens within the Concordium ecosystem is, once you download a wallet, you go through the motion of identifying yourself. You take a picture, just like any other, service that you access, if it's an exchange or whatever else it is. You take a picture of your passport or your driver's license. Behind that are IDPs, identity providers, that are verifying that this is a legitimate document. And what they then do, which is important, because people have the questions, and I've heard this a lot, that my passport is now on chain somewhere. No, it's not. What happens is that they issue a cryptographic hash to the wallet, which is an identity object that just holds the information. So basically, when was I born? I don't care, 7th of November, 1985. enjoy that. Everybody, I'm looking forward to a load of birthday messages end of the year. So what it ultimately comes down to is then, depending on what service I would like to access, which is where I'm now talking, why stablecoin providers, and you've seen so many announcements, and there are many more to come now over the course of the next couple of months, are so keen in order to build on us, is the idea of you being able to, for example, just have age verification as an example. So I would like to access, gaming, gambling, adult industries, for example, that are under enormous reg pressure in order to prove, because just pushing a button saying, yes, I'm over 18 is not enough anymore. So if I have that, under the zero knowledge protocol is built in a way that once I start to use a service, the chain just basically checks, is this person over 18 or not? And says yes. If I would like to go down the route of like geofencing, as another example, right? I'm a listed security in the US, right? Or in Europe, meaning that you are subject to the regulation in and around where those securities can travel, where they can be held. So do I need to prove, if I would like to hold it in my wallet, am I an American citizen and am I an American resident? Hence, chain goes, okay, you are. So the privacy preserving part is extremely important there, because you don't want your information floating around freely even in the Web3 world. And specifically when it comes to certain industries or certain use cases that you would like to access on a daily basis, think of alcohol purchases or whatever else it is. Like I say, I remember I'm a smoker, unfortunately, right? So what you have is, fortunately, I still enjoy it. I would stop it if I don't. But at the end of the day, when you had to buy cigarettes, I remember that I had to put in a bank card into the machine at the time in order to purchase it. The reason why I had to do this is because you can only have a bank card when you're over 18. That's where you trust the bank for you to do the relevant KYC in order for you to get a debit card, right? So the way of proving, and this is no different, if you think of capture and like I said, the simple bar of like, I'm over 18, this is where we are using CKs in the correct way, very much use case driven. And that's important to understand. So your passport, your driver's license is never on chain, just like the same way that you maybe have the question with regards to, if you're on board on an exchange or anything else, it's exactly the same way, or a bank these days, whoever else it is. And then subsequently, you've got the cryptographic hash in the form of this identity object that is attached to the wallet that then allows you, in order to have the CKs do their work correctly. Does that make sense?
Love that. I always love hearing other people try to explain ZK, because it helps me level up my understanding. Or I've again done my version of the story a billion times. I've heard any number of people make reference to showing a driver's license to enter a bar, which is typically an American or North American reference, because nobody in Europe has ever had to do that in their entire lives. But there's lots of hypothetical examples of why does age verification matter, or why does identity proof matter. There are other examples where there are industries where you want to sell or share data, where you definitely don't want your seller to know who you are, but you do want to buy their product, particularly when it comes to data.
Yeah.
Right? So buying and purchasing data or exchanging data, you want to prove that you've paid. You want to prove that you are an entity from a certain jurisdiction, but you definitely don't want you definitely don't want the seller to know that you're the CIA.
Correct.
Or, insert competitor of theirs, or it's X, Y, and Z, right?
Correct.
There's loads of sort of weird edge cases, but also lots of everyday compliance regulated industry use cases, which I think is super powerful. Also, the important part around ZK, like you said, is the data doesn't leave your system. The passport picture, image, and data doesn't leave your device or your wallet. What you're sharing is a proof of data. You're sharing an encrypted proof that the application on the other side can say yes or no. Does the data in this wallet represent somebody who's over 18? Yes or no? Right. And so they've at least learned that fact about you, but that's not made available to anybody else.
Well, they haven't,
or they could choose to.
They haven't even, like, just to be clear, the other side, like, for anybody that's new to CKs, they didn't even learn that. The change just goes like, it's okay. Like, they don't know when you're born. Like, they don't know, like, that's just very important.
Conditions are accepted. Please proceed with the workflow.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. There is nothing else to it.
Yes, which is which is nice and powerful. And anybody who's worked in and around identity and data is going to get that immediately. It's like, oh, that's quite nice. That's quite sexy. That's quite useful.
And quite unique, because if you then think of the issuance on the protocol level, instead of, in a layer 2 smart contract, whatever else it is that you kind of give certain conditions to, you suddenly have the idea, which everybody has been, how long have we heard the narrative now of smart programmable money? Forever. But there is no smart programmable money really out there, because it's not smart at all, because you have to add a load of other things in order for it to become smart. Our view is
very, very transparent digital and public money, which is part of which is a genuine risk for a lot of people. And I'd love your take on what people don't know that they're risking today, based on a lot of the way existing applications or tokens are run. But sorry, I cut you off on the how do we do things.
No. I've said what I wanted to say. It's just like, it's simplicity. Like, for me, it's simplicity. Do you want to understand in detail of how everything works in the backend, the cryptography in and around zero knowledge proofs? Well, good luck. There is maybe a handful of people on the planet that can do this to the nth degree, right? I'm not one of them, by the way.
Which is also a risk for adoption, which is the slightly unfortunate thing, is that if we want regulators or the financial services industry to become comfortable with the idea of using proofs, they at least have to be able to audit the tech.
Yeah, but again, this is where I'm saying it depends on how you make it accessible. Mm-hmm. Because right now there are things that you have access to which are extremely complex in the back end, and this is where you don't, and archaically complex in the back end. This is like 1970s shit, right? So at the end of the day, look, I'm very keen, in order to kind of see of how this plays out. I've got a very, very clear view, because I think the space and I think the world is kind of gagging for something like this. Because everybody goes like, okay, so what is it now? Like, we still look at it, right? Bitcoin is what, 64% market like dominance, and then the other ones are filling up the other 20%, and then there is a kilometer of shit. So all I'm saying is, if we are actually keen in order to solve for something and actually have, instead of trying to fight over the crumbs, how about baking a new cake, in a nutshell, and focus our attention to the world that is outside of, the very well-established names and businesses that are currently running the show. If you think of blockchain or crypto, there is a much bigger pie to kind of go after on the other side.
And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for the bonus content where me and Boris actually make a cake and a pie.
Like, back to back, I've got my arms around you. It's gonna be beautiful.
Put your comments down below what kind of pie you'd like me and Boris to make, or what kind of cake you think Stablecoins would be. Yeah. You mentioned that there are 5 or 6 or 7 teams building already in the Concordium ecosystem. I know it's you're still relatively early or still relatively new to the team, but let's go through some of the examples if you're able to share them. What are the guys building today, or what are the use cases that you're really trying to push at the moment that you think have really strong potential?
I mean, there are use cases that have been on now for a while, because the project is relatively old, if you want to call it like this. There are in and around provenance. There's a very cool project called Provenance Tags that just basically, tracks and fulfills all the necessities in and around provenance for all sorts of products. But, it's an open source chain. Everybody can build on this as they wish. The focus of the business is in and around stablecoins, like we've established now. And there are different types just coming back, from non-yield bearing ones that kind of have an idea in order to kind of get the yield that they generate on the back end in order to invest into businesses locally. Like, for example, AEDX is a project down in the UAE, all the way to Noon, Deep Blue, Euro Dollar just now. This is where you go into like the MiCA compliance side of things. We've announced that today. So all of it is going to come into, thank you. All of it is going to come into, and there are several others, and over the course of the next couple of weeks, you're going to hear several more. But what it comes down to is those PLTs, those protocol level tokens, the issuance, that's going live, like I said, end of June, July, and that's going to be the big reveal in terms of also the use cases. If you want to strip it away and kind of go into the use cases, we are working on several things in and around trade finance, for example. where suddenly a yield-bearing stablecoin makes a lot of sense because it just injects additional juice into the transaction. Plus, of course, kind of de-risks it also a little bit, because if you have it properly programmed, you can have the conditions, whatever the conditions are, right? But suddenly a smart contract is doing what, in my opinion, a smart contract should be doing, which is like if you want to track a boat across the Atlantic and basically say the condition according to our contract is that every 100 meters you get a certain percentage unlocked, then that's the smart contract, what it does. It doesn't have a custodial function, which is the important bit. It just enforces conditionality.
I really like that one. And trade finance was one of the OG blockchain private DLT use cases. Any number of different trade finance blockchains, many still going, right? But TradeLens from IBM was one that sounded, it was not Concur. It was sounded like Concordium, but that was the team based out in Singapore, I believe. R3 had one. Everybody had one.
Yeah. And it just depends the usage, right? You would like to have an array of stables, in this case, or cash equivalent, that you would like to attach to this and have the ability to program the conditions in to it.
Yes. And the yield bearing thing's super nice, right? Because the amount of value at stake, if you've got the day rate of a Cape size bulk carrier, you're doing $300,000 a day.
Yeah.
Right. And you multiply that by a 80-day journey from Australia to Europe, or a 50-day journey from South Africa to Europe. I can't remember the exact numbers. But broadly speaking, that's a lot of money just for the carriage, not the cargo itself. And so the values at stake in some of these trade flows are massive.
Plus,
international.
There are a ton of people in the middle that are cutting quite nicely along the way, which is all the stuff that you can kind of get rid of. So if you then figure out, which is, we said we're not talking roadmap, certain locking mechanisms that allow you in order to have certainty. So just think of, I always like to tie it back to something that people can relate to. Like, for example, rental agreements. What's the first thing that you have to do once you sign a rental agreement? You have to put a security deposit down. So suddenly the money leaves your account and sits in the landlord's account for the course of your, tenancy. Why? If I have the ability, in order to give you absolute certainty on chain, that this money is assigned to you and only to you and can't be assigned anywhere else, the whole double spending issue, and it's coming your direction depending on what the conditions are, but this money spits out a yield, well, I would be an absolute idiot not to do that, right? And I can actually go like, look, according to the conditions, should the money spit me out more than 10%, we're going to split the above by 50%. Thank you very, very much for taking me in as a tenant. Like,
yep.
There are so many options. It's mind blowing.
And if you're in Portugal, you're paying potentially up to 6 months worth of a deposit, which is nuts, by the way. That's not okay. But still, the amount of value in that escrow type of contract, or just not earning a yield, or happily earning somebody else a yield, in this case, landlords might not love it as much because they're getting 100% of the yield today. But I take it. I see the point. I see the application 100%.
But the other bit is like something more tangible. Think more of like the edgier industries, gaming, gambling, adult. Like there is, they tried to kind of solve for this several years ago. It's quite difficult but they already accept stables or crypto as payment. So the barrier is far, but at the same time, they're under enormous regulatory pressure because of the nature of their business. So, and we made quite some advances there, which is also like you will see and hear about in the coming months. So, where age verification, for example, plays a major role, right? So this is the use cases. But look, at the end of the day, we provide the rails. The issuers that are with us and that are about to be with us, they have a ton of use cases that they would like to solve. And the reason why they come to a chain that is pretty much unknown, if you look at it, it looks awful, right? Because it's been around for a long time and it didn't do, it just didn't Solana up, if you want to call it like this. So at the end, identity wasn't necessarily a sexy, topic for specifically the degens. So I'm very hopeful with regards to it. The proof's always in the pudding, but that you have issuers come on and go like, that is exactly what we needed. Thankfully, finally somebody built it. Psychs me pretty up, I can tell you that. So
100%.
But in terms of the use cases, think of those verticals, and then of course anything in and around compliance, or from MiCA to the whatever, the details. I highly recommend that people are reading the Genius Act, and have a little browse through what it actually means, also with regards to stablecoin regulation. So it's very exciting times ahead for the space, in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. And remember to subscribe to see which ZK proof Boris is going to put in his pudding this week on our additional content.
Your puns are epic. Yeah, good.
Concordium zero knowledge proof pudding. I promise I am going to stop with the baking references, but they just fall in naturally, Boris. I don't know what it is. The chemistry is strong. The cooking references are there.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Shout out Jared, who's coming for the comment here. More a comment than a question, I guess, which is the interesting challenge is not the problem that these solutions solve. It's scaling it to mass nation or national adoption. The conceptual potential of the technology, blockchain in this case, or stablecoins is immense, but replace existing financial systems fully in an integrated manner with good governance at national level is where the real pain points are, given cybersecurity challenges. Shout out Jared for the observation. I would agree with this one in terms of trying to find ways for innovative technology or exponential technologies to blend with traditional technology is complex. In some cases, the technologies we're building in and around Web3 should directly replace entire workflows, right? And you've got good examples of that. You've got bad examples of that. The Australian Securities Exchange has been trying to become blockchain based for about 75 years and still isn't. And I think they abandoned the project because the complexity of integrating DLT around their traditional securities infrastructure was either too hard or ill-conceived, or other factors also. Right, so we've seen
other factors also. I know a little bit about it, but like
we've all got friends who've worked in it at some point. And again, I don't wish to set anybody off online or on the show. The point is, traditional organizations have had, or non-Web3 organizations or non-Web3 native organizations have had trouble adopting different technology, even at the basic level. Right, finance transformation, treasury management, and wallet management around tokens is just something that Glenda or Mike in finance at some point suddenly now has to become experienced with wallets or managing custody.
Which is where I'm saying the problem is, right? Because if you then have to have a session to try to explain to people what a mnemonic phrase is, they go like, what do you mean? What happens if I lose that? And well, that's pretty bad. And then irrevocably stuff is gone. So again, there are ways around this, which also we are solving for, by the way, in and around the identity itself. So, the whole idea of minting and burning is something where you kind of have capabilities, right? It depends on what the use case is. So we just didn't make it easy enough yet. That's the core thing. Like we're stuck in, there are all those amazing founders from all those different projects, one of which you worked for, right? Which are speaking a language which is extremely complicated and complex, right? And if you try to wrap your head around this, it's, at the end of the day, you're running into the same problem on an adoption curve like anything else. It was the same with the internet. And I think we heard this a lot of times. People were like, well, why would I need this? It's like, there is nothing that works. Whole countries, like, whole countries are going down. If there is a little glitch on the internet side, planes have to get grounded. It's like also because that's what the entire world is running on. So it's going to be the same thing, but there are contingencies that you can build in that kind of de-risk certain things and make it far much cheaper, faster, and just purely better. That's what it comes down to. For sure. If the business case is strong enough, then things will change quickly. But my experience is digital transformation always takes time. And even even a simple switch out of something will probably take you at a minimum a year, sometimes two. And if you're talking about core banking projects where you're just replacing one set of banking systems with another set of banking systems that are no paradigm change, just some different endpoints. No way. There is no way like that this is happening, and also that you switch the old one off on a Tuesday and on Wednesday the new one's running. That's just not going to happen. I mean, a lot of this stuff, is built in the 70s, built on Cobalt. Like this is, and then we just wrapped in order for it to not to fall over. It's an absolute shit show. So, but also the institutions know it, and it's not like they're just complacent and sit on the sidelines. You see that they're trying to solve for those things and do little parts in order to kind of test stuff out. And I think in the next cycle, if you actually think of the core use case, step away of like, Bitcoin did its thing, right? And it's going to continue doing its thing, right? The more BlackRock ETFs are coming out and all this kind of stuff, it's only good. And then it's going to go into pensions, and then it's going to go into, it's fantastic, right? But at the end of the day, when it comes to the underlying technology, it's not about just value creation. It's also about, replacing systems. And that is a very, very difficult task. So it'll run in parallel in smaller circles until people go like, okay, well, this is not actually too scary and it works. Cool. It looks and feels like the shit that we were doing before. So why not go mainstream with it? And you've just seen it in the news lately, You've seen what Stripe did, MasterCard, like everybody is trying to solve for this right now. And this is where the stablecoin narrative and PayFi specifically, where we are positioned wonderfully because of who we are in terms of the tech that we provide. It's just one of the addresses that people are going to. And the amount of stablecoins coming to us and issuing us is a very good sign that this is actually happening.
Fantastic. And congratulations for that. It's nice to see any project in our space growing and finding that great product market fit or that great drive, because universal infrastructure is a really hard thing to sell. And it's a very difficult thing to make success with also. And I think a lot of people have found that out in the last little while. As a final thought, you've covered a whole bunch of stuff today. We've covered use cases, we've covered tech, we've covered existing problems. Are there any other things that you see will be important for us to see more widespread adoption of blockchain and Web3 technology?
I think simplicity is the core thing. I think we touched upon it. Wallets, all the way from the institutional stuff, and when it comes to that, I know a thing or two because of Copper. All the way to day-to-day retail, where you've also got like the MetaMasks of this world ruling right now, but there are projects coming out which are really doing amazing work in and around this to kind of simplify that part, plus the integration and the willingness of those big institutions that are currently in this world, that are the shovels and picks, if you want to call it like this, to adopt this in a way of like going, well, this kind of makes, and there are loads of players. Think of PayPal, think of ParUSD, all this kind of stuff. Those guys they've got a full merchant network, same as Stripe, same as MasterCard. These are there are for those, when you actually think of stable coins as a mean of payment, that's not a big leap. Replacing a core banking system in like even a 10-year window is ludicrous. So, but having the ability to just pay by with Face ID, whatever else it is, and you're not having to worry about private keys, and the next thing is like sponsored transactions, all this kind of stuff. It's all solved for. It's just a matter of like taking the first leap, and this is where the regulatory side of things comes in. And there is so much backwind right now that, in my opinion, I think this is going to happen, and it's going to happen real fast, in my honest view. So that's the exciting. So coming to like the big drivers, like I say, simplicity and actual use cases on a day-to-day basis that are stepping away from this pure crypto bubble and actually focus on what's right in front of us.
Great stuff. Fully agree. And thank you so much for taking us through the deep dive on ZK, the importance of privacy, PayFi, stablecoins, why it hasn't quite worked out just yet. And again, very much looking forward to producing some cooking related content. If you do end up, you're very welcome to have the 0K, the proof pudding, the zero knowledge proof pudding. If I see any of that on the Concordium socials over the next little while, anything that's shared on this show is open source, so take it and run with it.
It's a pretty good idea, actually. I'm pretty sure Varun is cooking something up already.
That's it. There we go. And on that note, we'll end the show. Boris, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Wishing you all the success. Looking forward to the new announcements. Have a great rest of your week and stay safe out there.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. And look it up. Concordium.com. Join us on X, etc. Join the movement. Looking forward to it.
Let's go.